Bienvenidas a todos. La verdad es un gusto tenerlo a Ricardo Lopes Kotz. Ricardo ha estado de visiting scholar en el Nucleo Milenio de Impactos de China en América Latina. Y ha estado muy activo. Hay gente que viene y está muy dedicada a su agenda, a su investigación. Ricardo ha sido muy participativo en las actividades del núcleo, en las actividades del Centro de Estudios Asiáricos, UC, y nos pareció una gran idea que él pudiese presentar el avance de su investigación antes de retornar a Hong Kong o a Brasil, porque lo presento brevemente. Ricardo es brasilero, de Uruguayana más específicamente, hizo una maestría en la Universidad Federal de Santa Catarina, Universidad Federal de Santa Catarina, luego una maestría en la Universidad de Renmin en China, ahora es alumno doctoral en City University de Hong Kong. Y bien, estás en tu barrio, hemos vuelto a América del Sur, a pesar de que Chile y Brasil son muy distintas. Estamos muy contentos de que hayas estado un tiempo con nosotros y en fin, ahora lo importante es acompañar tu pesquisa, tu investigación a la defensa de la tesis. Es apoyarte en lo que necesites. Ahora que si partes, sigamos el vínculo para que puedas disponer de toda la gente que está en ICLAC, para darte una mano con el valor que le ofrecemos a los visitantes. Así que bueno, todo tuyo, Ricardo. Hay gente que está conectada online, había algunos inscritos en Brasil. Vamos a grabar la presentación, no sé si hay que darle play ahí. Ya está grabando, bien, después se va a subir a YouTube. Y el piso tuyo, hay una cámara que apunta a las personas, no la estás viendo, pero la cámara está allí, entonces a las personas que hablan le apunta más o menos directamente, tranquilo. Tienes el pasador de diapositivas, unos 20 minutos y luego hacemos un feedback, preguntas y demás.
Bien.
Ya.
Gracias, Francisco, por la presentación y gracias a todos por estar con nosotros en esta mañana. Para mí fue muy lindo estar acá con ICLAC, trabajar con la gente. Fui a muchos eventos y en Hong Kong estaba un poco aislado en el tema de Latinoamérica y acá sí me sentí como parte de una comunidad así, de investigadores y eso fue muy bueno. Además, todo lo que aprendí, las informaciones, intercambiamos. Bueno, si me permite, voy a hablar en inglés porque se va a pasar mal si hago la presentación en español. Es que... So I'm going to be speaking today about the topic of my thesis, which is about China, Latin America, the political economy of energy, foreign direct investments. I made this presentation with some contents that are not specifically about the structure of the thesis. So the first two topics are about the subject more broadly, and then I speak about the structure of the thesis, so that it's not so boring for people that might not be so into academia. Maybe we have other people from other sectors watching. So first, an overview of China, Latin America investments. There have been a diverse range of projects. Total FDI of Chinese firms investing in the region has reached around $200 billion in the 20 years comprised by these statistics. Depending on where you look at it, this value will shift a little. You can find like 180 billion, 210, like it shifts, but it depends if they consider construction as a part of foreign direct investments or not, or if they, like how these investments are taken into account, but it doesn't vary that much. The main point is that it has accelerated after 2012, when Xi Jinping comes into power. They released the Belt and Road Initiative, and Brazil concentrates about 1/3 of Chinese FDI in the region. And then you have some major players there, Chile, Argentina, Peru, which is notably high. basically because the sectors in which China invests in Peru are very capital intensive. So these projects like the Chancay port and some of the mining and infrastructure that went into Peru, they are huge projects in terms of value. And Mexico is quite underrepresented considering that it's one of the major economies in Latin America, but it's very close to the US. So, and then the other is not that they are less important, but they have lesser figures in that overall. So energy represents more than 40% of Chinese FDI in the region. And then I brought some examples that are going to be in the thesis. So BYD's investments in Brazil in EVs, hydropower projects in Brazil and Chile, wind and solar, lithium. We have been hearing about these sectors quite a lot. And I'll go into more depth as the presentation goes on. It's just to give like a broad overview. So there have been a few changes. I'm not going to read through all of that, but it's mainly that there have been more and more participation of private companies investing in Latin America, not only state-owned. The state-owned companies were the main actors until 2015. And after that, they're still very important, but you have more and more private companies. The sectors of destination have shifted from legacy sectors, traditional, like oil, gas, and now they also comprise strategic minerals, EVs, renewables. The flows of investments are smaller in quantity, but there's a higher number of projects, smaller projects. And the FDI are increasingly directed to tech sectors or energy, but energy not in a very only extractive way, but energy sectors that use technology and knowledge. So now we're going to like more specific issues. You can study this topic from many, many different areas, let's say. So you could study the topic from a perspective of geoeconomics and the disputes between China and the United States. How does that affect Latin America? You could also focus on the energy transition and decarbonization, and also in issues of technology and reindustrialization. So there are different areas, possibly, and I personally have shifted. I started in a more geoeconomics discussion, and now I'm more situated in energy transition, and because I had some difficulties with my sources, I'll speak about that. However, China is a very capable actor economically, investing abroad, so dominates kind of the technology involved in the energy transition. Now it's responsible for more than 70% of solar panel production, more than 60% of wind turbines. It is adding most of the renewable capacity in the world in this decade. So it is a big player and indispensable if you think about transitioning towards green sectors. Even if China's energy mix is still composed a lot by coal is still 60% of China's energy mix of the total energy that China produces. So there's still a long way to go, but they are one of the biggest players. So they're also a big player in lithium batteries. You know, this could go on and on. You know, they produce the biggest producers of EVs in the last year. You have many, many ways to look at it. So just to bring a little color, you have the global manufacturing capabilities of batteries in 2022, and then the projected for 2027. China is projected to reduce its global market share, but still be largely ahead of the other players. And so you can have that for many, many sectors. And one of the key issues of it is its innovation capabilities, its innovation system, so to speak. So there's a lot of spillover effects from different companies. When you develop like battery capabilities by BYD and CATL. You also feed into industries like drone, made by DJI. You also feed into smartphones like Huawei, Xiaomi. So these companies, like when they develop technology, they kind of feed into each other and they help each other grow. We hope we could have a similar graph for Latin America one day in tech sectors. And then the thesis itself, so that I don't lose so much time. So I started with this hypothesis: could there be a rising regional value chain in EVs and batteries, kind of generated by Chinese FDI? Because I was seeing these investments of China buying lithium in Chile and Argentina. Started very strongly in Chile, and then it shifted towards Argentina in the last few years, and then investing a lot in EVs in Brazil. And, I was looking at this looks very exciting. But then after more than 30 interviews with experts, very few of the experts agreed that this was indeed feasible as a research now. That's not to say this won't happen one day or that this is a totally crazy idea. It's not totally crazy, but as of now, we don't have enough material sources to support that. So I dropped that argument. And now I also had difficulties accessing Chinese sources. So I was looking at geoeconomics. I kind of dropped that as well. So now I'm looking at the consequences of Chinese investments for the energy transition in the region. Seems like a little more feasible. Are these investments contributing to the economies in the region? Are they contributing to the change towards renewables? Seems a little more feasible. And it's interesting that the latest studies by ICLAC show that there are not many of these investments that have been thoroughly studied. And a lot of these studies focus on, like 50% focus on 17 projects, which are like the biggest ones. They're they draw a lot of attention. But then there's many projects that still haven't been studied by the literature very deeply. So I think there's a path forward there, even if it's modest. I mean, it's not a breakthrough innovation, but it's incremental, and sometimes incremental is the best we can do. So I spoke with a lot of people about Brazil, and I think I'm sorry. I think I'm going to skip this point. No. Yeah. Yo hablé con mucha gente. I spoke with a lot of people in Brazil, and many people in industry and also academia told me that as of now, the country largely focuses on assembly and sales. So it's a very semi-peripheral position, which is not groundbreaking, while Brazil is occupying a semi-peripheral position in a high-tech value chain. So that's one of the same, you can say. The same could be said of solar panels. Like Brazil produces some solar panels, that there is a national production, but there's a lot of assembly as well, and just buying imported products. So that's not very encouraging. The country does a little better with wind, and we'll talk about that a little later. So in wind, we have had a little more success, and there are a few industrial policies like New Brazilian Industry and Mover 2030. They are focusing around 30 billion USD to green energy sectors. They do it through BNDES and also regional banks and other institutions. But the interviewees have said that many of these policies are they go into very many directions. lacks clarity, the documents are a bit overloaded, and there is not a lot of coordination in the institutions. And the Chinese have picked up on that, and they are negotiating with different actors. So they go to state actors in São Paulo, and they negotiate with them. They go with state actors in Santa Catarina, and they do the same. And so they're like kind of taking a divide and conquer, let's say, strategy. And Brazil is not able to react and respond to that. So this I thought it was interesting. And then we get to the structure of the thesis itself as it is now, because I've written a lot and I've had to put a lot of material aside because the thesis has changed over time. And so now I think it's more important to get the direction right before continuing to produce more content, otherwise it will go to waste. And of course, this structure will be more fleshed out. It will be more, not just these points, but these are the main. So I'll start with the debate about energy transition. I'll go into uneven and dependent development, global value chains, and upgrading in the region, like something of this sort. Then I'll go to a chapter with an overview of Chinese investments in Latin America, especially in the energy sector. Then we have like an overview and broad case of Brazil and Chile. Then finally, we get to the study cases, which is the most important part. So I'm not sure that I'll keep hydropower in it. It might be too much to do in one thesis. So maybe it will be like this: hydropower in one chapter, solar, wind, and EVs on the other. Seems like a lot, but actually in EVs, there's not so much. EVs chapter EV subchapter can be quite short, whereas hydropower, you have a lot, and solar and wind, well, depending on the country, have more or less. And then these are just a few examples. I'm not going to go through all of them, but in hydropower, Brazil and Chile, as CTG is China Three Gorges. It is one of the big actors, and SPIC is State Power Investment Corporation. Both of them are state-owned and are the main players, apparently, projects that have actually gone through. SPIC acquired Pacific Hydro in Chile, and with this acquisition, they acquired 5 major hydropower plants with a combined capacity of more than 500 megawatts, which is very powerful. And they have a strategy of vertical integration, which I thought was interesting. They produce infrastructure, renewables, transmission lines, they do all. So SPIC is one of the companies that will definitely be on the thesis, because not only it invests in hydropower in both Brazil and Chile, but it also invests in solar and wind in Brazil. We have there. Goldwind is another interesting case. It's a turbine manufacturer in Brazil. And finally, we have, again, SPIC investing in solar parks again. So SPIC will definitely be in the thesis. They do it all. More and more cases. So I'm deciding among which of these projects will be in the thesis. This is why I brought them all. I'm not going to speak about all of it, but just to bring the cases. Then we have the EVs is much less. We have BYD's acquisition of 4 plants in Bahia State, Great Wall Motors. BYD produced China's only battery manufacturing plant in South America, in Manaus, but it mostly does assembly of batteries. And lately we have an interesting case, which is BYD Ryzen joint venture. BYD did a joint venture with this Brazilian firm which produce biofuels, and now they are building charging stations for EVs in 8 Brazilian capitals, and they also installed 9 solar plants. So I think I would like to keep the BYD case, because also it draws a lot of attention. We got to be a little strategic about that. So BYD and SPIC will definitely be in. And then in Chile, we have, the Pacific Hydro case that I already mentioned, SPIC again. State Grid is a big player. It has built great capacity by acquiring the largest distributors in Chile, Quinta, Energía, and the Compañía General de Electricidad. And they also, there's FDI in Solar Park by Pacific Hydro. So it's kind of the same actors appearing again and again, which actually is good because the thesis cannot grab all of the companies separated if you have 20 companies, but then if you have a few companies, it's actually better. And this is the graph that I saw this week. Chile se pasó a la energía solar y nunca miró atrás, because Chile has built a lot of capacity in the last 10 years. You see the graph. So this is megawatts per person, I think. Yeah, it's per capita, per hour per person, yeah. And in 2014, there was almost nothing. And then in the space of 10 years, Chile has gone much, much better than most of the neighbors, most of the neighboring countries. So this is a nice case. And, the conclusions are, we are always there. Latin America lacks a common strategy, lacks energy infrastructure, transport infrastructure. So you have structural factors that speak to the continuity of a partnership between China and the region, and technology and upgrading remains our main problems. I think specific policies in each country could help mitigate this scenario, like the industrial policies, but it's not a direct connection. Industrial policies cannot be well implemented, and FDI comes in different forms. When it comes in mergers and acquisitions, it's not as good for the development and upgrading of local countries as if it comes by joint ventures or greenfield, where it builds more capabilities and you have more spillover effects. That would be better. And the thesis doesn't speak about trade, but I just brought these pictures because they are very easy to see if there are people not from academia maybe watching us. The issue of adding value is the permanent issue in Latin America. You have their exports from China to Brazil, and then exports from Brazil to China. China's exports are very diversified, a lot of tech sectors. Brazil exports mainly commodities, or iron ore, soybeans, oil. If you go to other actors in the region, it's very similar. This is Chile, China to Chile, and then Chile to China. So this is like, the thesis doesn't speak about trade, but this is the rationale that, makes me think about this argument. Can we actually finally add some value in the region, produce some technology here, and not just consume China's final renewable goods? I hope we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Very, very good. Let's see if there are questions. There's 10 people online, and how can I tell if there's questions here? If there's questions o si hay preguntas, por favor en el chat las escriben. Voy a estar atento, si no vamos a hacer una ronda aquí. Gracias, Ricardo. Muy interesante, very interesting. Let's keep it in English just to keep the tone. And I don't know if there's people online who from Brazil. I think it's easier to follow in English than in Spanish sometimes. I have a question. That's a question. Jessica?
Me too.
and Johannes. And
Javier.
Javier. Hagamos así. Jessica, Johannes, Francisco, Javier.
Thank you, Ricardo, for your interesting talk. This is totally not my area, so I ask questions. But I understand you're looking at mostly the activity of corporations rather than state actors. And I want to ask from the perspective of the bottom up, what are the reactions of people in Brazil and Chile to these presences of Chinese companies? Are you looking also at that side of things, like the popular response to the investments?
Thank you very much. Very interesting. I have a series of different questions. I will just thinking where I start. Okay. When we are talking about FDIs and about Chinese FDI in Latin America and about energy, there are also a series of activities by Chinese companies which are not necessarily an FDI, but they are as a partner in projects, developing projects, providing components, sometimes building up the solar parks, but afterwards they not appear as an owner of the solar park when it's in operation. So I think it's very good that you are looking at those as well, because it's important to understand the activity of Chinese companies in Latin America and then consider this kind of activities. But just as a small warning, if you are talking about FDI, then strictly in a strict sense, they're not foreign direct investment necessarily. Yeah, that's one point, and the other point is about adding value. I'm not sure, and we can talk later about that, if the value chain approach is the most promising approach for your discussion. And I completely understand where it comes from and where this argument about adding value comes from, but it's also sometimes a little bit dangerous in terms of a possible misunderstanding. If you are looking at mining activities and to consider them as not adding value, that's not exactly correct, because frequently exactly in the step of extracting the mineral from the underground is exactly the step where most value is added, because you consider it at least in economic terms. So maybe rather than about value chains and the question where is value added, maybe it's more promising to discuss about production networks, for example, with very variable possibilities to build up or to represent the participation of Chinese company, and not only in a simplistic linear perspective of the value chain.
Why don't you answer those, and then we do a round of two, and then we see if there's someone else in the public. Okay, online. Yeah.
Thanks, Jessica and Professor as well. So about the bottom up and the localities, this is a very interesting topic. It gives way to many different research, especially when we went together to an event in Peru.
Yeah.
They were talking a lot about the just energy transition, and there are many researchers that focus more on this aspect of the popular response in the localities. I cannot focus on that right now because it will be too broad for my time, but it's super interesting as well. I'm focusing more on the firms and in the country and firm level, which is more like top down, I think. No, this this thesis has been kind of a chameleon from the start. It has changed so much. And I think maybe the value chain approach is something that stays from the previous versions.
I see.
When I started with the idea about the EV regional value chain, but now that the topic is changing, maybe it's not the best approach, actually. I thank you very much for the suggestion. I'm going to read more into production networks. Is more like geographer.
It's more from geography. I'm a geographer myself. That's why I'm thinking about this. So it was just an example.
Yeah, but it's good. I need to talk to people and exchange ideas like this, because maybe, value chains is too detached. It stays too upwards from the reality of these investments. I will review that. And the debate about the mining sector, this is something I realized I was totally out of my depth when I came to Chile, and I started going to the events. I went to an event in Cepal, I went to events here, and I started to realize that I was not prepared to go there maybe on my thesis. I should maybe stay on the energy. I mean, I started with it because I was talking about lithium and EVs, but now I'm not sure that I'm going to go there, because there's a world of people who know a lot, and I'm going to go in there. I'm going to get a hit on the face, and quite deservedly so. So I think I'm going to stay more on the energy projects. So we have to recognize our limits.
¿Puedo preguntar en español? Por supuesto. Bueno, mi pregunta va ligada a lo siguiente. Actualmente nosotros seguimos inmersos en esta tensión mundial entre Estados Unidos y China, y me gustaría saber tu percepción acerca de esta influencia e injerencia que ha tenido China, como tú bien exponías, en infraestructura que es crucial, transporte, en lo energético, también en la academia. Si esto a la región latinoamericana le trae más cosas positivas o negativas viendo la posición actual de Estados Unidos.
Más que, o sea, sí, también es un feedback, más que una pregunta. Creo que I think that the project is I think it's positive that you made this adjustment. You're staying in Chile. I agree that the renewable investment from Chinese companies is still understudied. You could bring valuable insight for people studying other regions in Africa. I think you identified very interesting cases. I think it's still very unclear to me the theoretical angle in the one side. It looks to me like you are having a grasp based kind of on center periphery and you develop at least theories on whether we are repeating patterns. That seems to be your intuition. I don't know if that's correct, but I would encourage you to at least define for now whether you're looking at the Latin American side, which seems to be the case, or to the Chinese side. From the Chinese angle, there are very interesting questions. For example, there's clustering here that I've been looking at. Some of the energy projects go close to mining projects, so the solar plants, the wind plants provide energy to these other extractive projects. Right? I was in Brazil last week, and they were telling me that this is happening also in Salvador. Where there's no mining, but there are data centers. All the cables, the oceanic cables, reach to Fortaleza, and they are using solar wind plants and Chinese investments to provide all the energy that these very intensive energy consuming data centers inactive. So at times there's like a synergy between investments in renewables from Chinese sectors to other sectors. And I like that topic, but that's a topic that's on Chinese agency and the reasons why the Chinese would invest in the region. If you're looking at the Latin American side, which seems like you are, to me, it would be interesting to ask them who's engaging with these Chinese companies, whether these Chinese investments are, as you said, having any impact in local communities. And there's people in my field in political science who study also political perceptions, lobby, regulation, and so on. For now, my sensation is that you need to refine it. The cases are all very interesting. It's a very nice list of projects. You can choose a company and do a cross-country comparison. Goldwind or Dina Solar, compare the company in 2-3 different countries. Brazil, Chile, it's fine. You could add an extra one. But it's very unclear so far for me. So then, what will you look at exactly? So it's okay, that's something we all face at a certain point. Kind of project. So I would like to push you on which ideas are you thinking of, which ideas are catching your attention the most, to help you kind of narrow down. I think that would be very, very valuable for you if you can get to narrow down before you go back to Hong Kong. You have changed topic, which is very good, I think. And now if you can narrow down on at least which angle are you looking at to give you a broader and better picture of both.
Thank you very much, Francisco and Javier as well. So I'll start with Javier just for the order. ¿Prefieren que le conteste en español?
Sí, en inglés mejor.
Okay.
Sí, entiendo. Solamente que me da vergüenza hablar en inglés.
Okay. So I think it's very positive for Latin America to have an alternative to the US. It's not alternative, one or the other, but to have at least other sides that you can cooperate. Because of course you're going to cooperate with both of these main actors, the biggest economies in the world and very important for the region. I think it's very good that now at least we have other models that we can, bargain in a triangular diplomacy kind of way. A country can bargain with either China or the US through these different engagements. So I see it as a very positive, also because the United States firms don't seem to be very intent on building infrastructure in Latin America or making this kind of high risk investments or longer return investments that China is doing. They seem to be more intent on focusing on other sectors. There are positive aspects of our relationship with the US as well. For example, Brazil's exports of industrial goods, they mainly go to Argentina and the US. Argentina through Mercosur, and then the US. So to China, we export a lot of commodities. So it's not to say that one is a good one, the other is a bad one, or it's just different, but it's good to have this variability, then we can bargain. And then to answer the Francisco's question and comments. So I think this is something that I think I need to clear this point up. When I speak about, you draw my attention to the fact that sometimes it seems like I'm speaking to the Chinese side and sometimes through the Latin American lenses of these investments. I think I haven't yet kind of closed down on a point here. And I'm having a lot of trouble with my theoretical argument. Like I see the empirical part and I write about it, it's fine. But then how do I frame this thing in? How do I build my argument? This
idea, but you give me a suggestion.
okay.
Yeah,
I'm having a lot of trouble. So first I thought about okay, I'm going to stay away of this local communities area because I have never done that, and I'm just afraid to go into a new topic when you are like close to the fence. You just open yourself up to. So I thought, okay, I studied like from the perspective of firms and states before. Let's stay on that. Like my two masters were on that, and I wrote some papers. So let's stay on like firm level and or state level analysis. And then renewables for sure, solar, wind, and EVs for sure. But I think it's really interesting I'm going to research more about this cluster effect and the synergies among the projects, because I haven't looked a lot about that. But I'm still uncertain as to how I frame this argument. I accept suggestions.
I have one. Let's do a more relaxed round of comments. Again, if there's people online, please, you can also ask or comment with the chat. I think that the design of your research, you came to Chile, now you compare Chile and Brazil, you're from Brazil. And it seems to me that usually it's easier to look at the demand side and the supply side when you found that getting Chinese investors was hard for you. If you had access to Chinese investors through interviews, that would be very valuable. Just to study the supply side and how they decide why and when to locate. My sense is that you would the confusion or the hardship in finding a theoretical angle is very normal. I mean, it shouldn't concern you. It's like something that we all face. My sensation is that something in the line of what Johannes suggested or even in the industrial policies, I think you could bear two countries. One country with a strong industrial policy, which is Brazil. Brazil has BNDES, belongs to has access to the credit of the new development bank by BRICS. And you mentioned two policies, concrete policies that could be playing a role in attracting investors from China. And then you have a country, Chile, trying to develop a policy, at least in the lithium sector. Not much success so far. I don't think there's anything like that in renewable or hydropower. It's mostly market-driven investment. So you could compare the two cases. That would help also to justify why you compare Brazil and Chile. These are very two different animals. But because the actors are the same, from a methodological design, you keep constant the actors. Trina Solar, Goldwyn, China Three Gorges. These are the same actors in Chile and in Brazil. But the effects that industrial policies produce may differ in how these investments take place. But the questions are different, or questions that we haven't addressed today, which are, for example, are there any policy banks involved in providing subsidies, credits, assistance to these investors? Is there a framework to decide where and how these companies should invest? Which role plays the ministries? What's the degree of enforcement of these industrial policies? There's a book by nothing to do with China. There's books on Brazil's developmental state, recent books. I can suggest you a couple later. and then use China as an excuse, China as a key player in the region, as an excuse to discuss industrial policy. Because I think, maybe I'm wrong, but that seems to me that that's what you are very interested on the kind of the normative question of why are we always keep discussing the same patterns of being exporter of commodities and importer of manufacturers. So that seems to be, to me, what you are very kind of, that's the puzzle that you are kind of bringing to the table. So a discussion on industrial policy would help you put more density to your theoretical discussion. And it's becoming trendy, you know, in the US, they are starting to speak of industrial policy again. That was a taboo topic. Probably, you know, Marina Mazzucato and all those things helped a lot, entrepreneurial state. And even Chile, a very neoliberal country, is now discussing the role of certain policies to guide investments. That's something you could look at.
Absolutely, and I think if I may be a little bit stubborn, the thing I mentioned before with global production networks actually combines perfectly with the suggestion of Francisco, because one of the strengths of global production network is exactly that you can incorporate the role of state in a much more central position and a much more structural and systematic manner, rather than you could do that in a global value chain approach. And I think it makes a lot of sense, especially to do this comparison, Brazil and Chile, but from the perspective of if there is or not complex industrial policy or strategy, which is not the case in Chile. Nevertheless, Chile has a very complete policy regarding energy transitions. You have a rather complex structure of different policies. Chile is very advanced in closing down coal, thermocentral plants. And without aiming to that, but implementing this policy, Chile created a relevant market for Chinese companies for producing energy, because we don't have the power plants anymore. That came with Piñera 1, I think so. Yeah, when there were at a certain point there were 20 power plants, coal-driven power plants in projects. Yeah, like 10 years ago, they were never built, but there were projects of 20. Yeah, and they were cancelled before starting building. Yeah, and they were mainly in the north, aiming to the mining sector. So that whole potential energy has never been produced and is moving towards solar and wind energy. And the second element, you have the need to store energy. Yeah. Because obviously wind and solar energy is very uneven in time. Yeah. You produce it at certain moments, then you need to store it. And there again, it's storage of energy. It's BYD and CATL. Those two together are providing about 80% or something of worldwide large energy storing technique. So there are several big projects in that sense in Chile at this moment building up, and it's always with Chinese providers. So it's not there has not been an industrial policy in Chile to build that sort of stuff, and you don't see it in the value chain. But it's a result of policy strategy decision. We are moving towards renewables. Then you create this market, and then the large Chinese companies are coming in. So it's entangled between Chilean states, markets, Chinese states, Chinese companies, but without being visible in an approach of looking at energy value chains, or not so easily. And I think it combines perfectly with what Francisco says.
You're making me very happy. I really need to exchange some ideas. I was just a bit all over the place. to imagine that I can combine both, like GPN with the industrial policy.
Yeah.
That's super.
Absolutely, you can combine those two perfectly.
That would give me like a different structure to watch to analyze the topic. Like
That's very interesting because you have a country that created the market opportunity through the closing of coal plants. In Brazil, there are no coal plants, but there's a huge dependency on gas and oil, where you also have the Chinese investing there. So probably the mechanism by which the Brazilian state is pushing or encouraging renewables is different. I don't know what's the answer, but it's probably different. So you may want to start by comparing both policies. What Brazil did in the last 10 years, what Chile did in the last 10 years or 12, to create the market or the opportunities for these Chinese investors to reach. And I think something that Johannes mentioned is very important for you to take care or mention explicitly, that if you're looking at the attracting of Chinese investors or companies, be careful in mentioning that some are not retaining ownership.
Yeah.
These are turnkey projects, so they come because they have such an advantage in the technology and process-wise that they come, they deploy the project, they give you the keys, and they go home.
Yeah.
There are joint ventures. Sometimes the local partner retain the ownership, but the debate on when 15 years ago, the debate on China's investment in energy was on energy security. That the Chinese wanted to secure energy resources for local consumption. This is energy that's consumed locally. I mean, of course, right? So the rationale is different, and there's no even ownership from the company. So you need to explain why, what happened again in the market that created interest for the Chinese to step in. I think that's very interesting to study. I don't know if there's comments, questions.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear all your presentation, but I came here because I thought it was very interesting. This topic that for me sometimes is a kind of an issue, right? Because I think that maybe somehow in this study, you should go and check what has done China with Africa first. Understand? They have been there for many years. They have been doing lots of things with many countries, right? Taking the resources, and yeah, maybe at the beginning they are doing turnkey, as you said, Francisco. But sometimes it's a starting, right? But then finally they are taking the dependence on the whole for the whole country. So now we are thinking, why South America is not working with China, and why they are always doing with Europe and always doing with United States. But what is going on with China? China is great. I think it's great. I love China, okay? But sometimes you have to think that they have one president for how many years? The Xi Jinping. How long has he been?
12 years.
Yeah.
13.
Okay. And he implemented this Belt and Road Initiative 2013. right?
Yeah.
And we are now 12, we are 25 now, 12 years. Okay, they have done a lot of things, okay? Not only in the, how can I say, not only in the transport, but in the digital sense, and also in the soft power sense, right? And so they have a very long plan, right? But what happened with Chile? We are just like dancing. Piñera, then Bachelet, another political party, right? Everything changes. Even the look and feel of the government is changing. Okay, yeah. So when Piñera came, they changed everything. The star was red, the other thing was white, whatever. Then it comes whoever, they change everything again. So imagine if they are thinking regarding changing even the look and feel of the country branding, okay? How they are changing all the political plans inside. 5 years, oh, we are going to do this. The other 5 years, oh, we are going to do another, just another plan. But what is going on with China? They are having 50 years plan, 25 years plan. Oh, China 2025, China 2050. So what they are doing with Africa is very different than what Europe or United States are doing regarding the resources, right? So maybe, just I'm thinking, maybe you could go and check what has done China with in these 50 years with Africa, and take just one country that may be similar to Chile. Okay, why I'm telling you this? Because yeah, it maybe sounds weird why you are comparing Chile with an African country, but I have lived in China for a few years, and I know that, for example, some products that they are selling to the Chilean and South American retail is the same kind of product, same quality they are doing also with Africa. So for them, maybe these countries, South America and Africa, are not that much different. So why you cannot maybe just compare what they said they were going to do, and finally how this project ended. For example, I know that there was an issue regarding some port project they have built in previously was Sri Lanka. Maybe now also Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a country that is growing 10% every year, but everything China. They are not having local force. They don't let local force for their Chinese project. So maybe you can.
La comparación estamos en la hora, entonces la pregunta sería si quieres reaccionar un poquito a la. ¿Te quieres presentar?
Sí, perdón. Mi nombre es Fiorella Bonino. Viví un tiempo en China, estudié en China. Hace poco llegué de vuelta y tengo una consultora que se llama The China Expert. Y ahora estoy escribiendo un libro sobre temas de inteligencia artificial con China, o sea, inteligencia artificial hecha en China. Y nada, quería venir a generar lazos.
Bueno,
Entonces, la pregunta sería un poco sobre la validez externa. Eso te lo van a preguntar mucho también. Creo que es el caso latinoamericano, cuánto contribuye al entendimiento de esto que vas a estudiar en otras regiones como África, sí, sobre todo, y quizás si lo has pensado, si has echado una mirada respecto de cuánto sabemos de la comparación de lo que vas a analizar con otras regiones.
Muy interesante, gracias. Solo para comentar también que, antes que me olvide, gracias por hacer la distinción entre los proyectos de FDI y los que están aquí, porque eso me iba a ser un golpe muy fuerte si me pego con eso, con proyectos que no están bien en la clasificación. O sea, gracias por eso. Y ahora el tema de África. Bueno, yo no conozco mucho el caso de China en África. Yo estudié esta Belt and Road de una manera un poco más larga cuando estaba en mi maestría. Eso en 2018, bueno, ha cambiado también, porque empezó muy fuerte con la infraestructura y ahora se convirtió, todavía hay infraestructura, pero hay más tecnología y AI, Digital Silk Road y cosas así. Yo voy a mirar si hay algunos países en África que se pudiera comparar un poco con Chile o con Brasil, porque es interesante ver, porque están invirtiendo allá hace más tiempo. O sea, sí sería interesante ver qué ha pasado, ¿no? Ya que existe más tiempo.
Porque China, al final, lo que quiere es tener una cierta dependencia de los países que están, bueno, en África, han generado una dependencia importante y seguramente es lo mismo que quieren hacer en Sudamérica. Ahora, es muy distinto tener un socio como Europa o Estados Unidos, que de repente van cambiando las ideas cada 5 años, como van cambiando los presidentes, demócratas, después llega el otro a dar vuelta todo de nuevo, que tener un país que tiene un gobierno y que planea todo su crecimiento en 25 años. Nuestro modelo occidental está totalmente fragmentado en comparación a lo que hay hoy día en China. Y nosotros no nos estamos dando cuenta de eso. Entonces es importante darle una vuelta, creo yo.
Ricardo, para terminar, te quisiera preguntar en un minuto, porque realmente nos pasamos de la hora, ¿cómo es tu agenda? Es decir, ahora estás en Santiago, pero contanos un poco cuándo es que vuelves a Hong Kong, qué pasa por Brasil primero, si vas a hacer campo en Brasil o no, y en qué momento debieses tener un borrador de esto, o sea, cuándo es que piensas defender tu tesis, como para orientarnos un poco. La idea de los seminarios del SEA son muy diversos. Hace unos 15 días hubo uno sobre soft power y productos culturales japoneses relacionados con la música, y aquí en Santiago. Pero la idea es dar feedback para que tu agenda continúe, sigamos en contacto y si hay dudas, seguimos por mail. Pero sería lindo contar, que nos cuentes qué son los próximos pasos que estás trabajando.
Sí, yo salgo de Chile el 25 de este mes, voy a Brasil y me quedo un mes en Brasil hasta principios de agosto. Voy a intentar hacer unas entrevistas en Río de Janeiro y São Paulo y también visitar mi familia porque no los he visto hace más de un año, ya no los veo. Pero un mes solamente en Brasil y ahí en agosto vuelvo a Asia, si todo va bien. Tendría que entregar esta tesis hasta marzo del próximo año, completa, ya, sí, para el comité, ¿no? Y hacer la defensa hasta julio.
Ya.
Fines de junio, julio.
Aquí tienes unos 8 o 10 meses para redactarla entera.
Sí.
Sí, sí.
Yo Tengo unas 100 páginas escritas, pero ahora ya no sé cuánto voy a ocupar porque ya ha cambiado tanto.
Está bien. Bueno, pero es parte ahora de ponerse y analizar los casos. Creo que lo de hoy fue bueno para hacer un poco de narrow down. Probablemente hay que hacer preguntas sobre qué buenos libros hay de Global Value. No Global Value Changes.
GPL.
GPL. Yo te pongo un par de trabajos buenos sobre Industrial Policy. Así en Chile no hay nada. Si hay, no. Pero sería bueno retomarlo de la cuestión de del cierre de las...
Sí, yo les voy a preguntar por WhatsApp porque quiero indicaciones.
Sí. Con gusto.
Bueno, gracias por venir. Al que no se aquí, Gabriela, Javiera, gracias por venir. Y el que están en casa también, un abrazo grande. La grabación que subida al YouTube del canal. Hasta pronto.